Oh, sorry, I was just muted, but now it should be better. Peace to everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'll put the StreamYard link if anyone wants to join the stage. Most welcome. So, today we have our surah discussion, actually more like analysis session. This is the usual format we've done before when we're on Telegram and such, where we go through the kind of analysis, partially in the AI, to really analyze the logic of the surah and the core message and the theme. Alaikum salam. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to share I guess we'll start in just the surah if we have any points.
Salam, brother.
Alaikum salam. Okay, so we'll read the surah, I guess, just for context, as we usually do at the start anyway. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. The praise is for God, Lord of the beings, the gracious, the merciful, ruler of the day of judgment. You we serve and you we ask for help. Guide us to the right path, the path of those you delight upon, not the path of those who anger is upon, and not the astray. So are there any thoughts or points that people may have thought of since last time, or didn't have a chance to express last time from the surah? We can discuss now freely.
So,
Walaikum salam. Okay, if not, I'll go to the ChatGPT window. Brother Saad asks that Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim also correspond to the immanence and transcendence of Allah, which maybe you can expand upon for those of us who are not so versed. No worries, brother. I just meant like define immanence and transcendence.
It's a bit blurry for some reason, and also, can you zoom in if possible? It's a bit too small.
Oh. Yeah, I always struggle to do that. The usual control plus whatever does not work for me.
How about making the window smaller?
I guess.
It's big now, right?
Yeah.
It's very big actually, but okay.
I'm gonna go back briefly at least because it's quite small for me. Like quite. I want to see more text basically for a second. Mm-mm. I don't know where I went here. I think when I resized the window, it just took me way further up. Okay, I think we've got there. Alhamdulillah. So as usual, just as a brief reminder, our methodology when analyzing surah is to determine the key verse or key passage to which the whole surah connects, because every surah seems to contain this. And then that allows us basically to analyze the whole logic of the surah, the whole structure, and the overall argument or theme or reminder. So for this surah, I had mentioned before how basically verse 6, like the whole surah basically functions as a prayer, which makes it unique to other surahs. Um, but verse 6 in particular is the object of the prayer, where we ask, guide us to the upright path. And then we describe which path, the path of those who delight upon, not the path of those who angers upon, and not the astray. But prior to that, we are praising God, um, calling upon God, like by his attributes, and declaring our exclusive worship of God. Yes, peace, brother Mahdi. I was going to expand it again, but every time I expand it, it changes where I am. So it's a bit annoying. But anyway, so for this surah, therefore, verse 6 is really like the object of the prayer, therefore the object of the surah, guide us to the upright path. Is basically what we're asking for in a single verse. Okay,
That
so here
verse
I think,
has only, okay, that verse has the only command verb or supplication verb in the surah. But I would say that Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is the one that permeates all the content that makes everything else possible.
that's an interesting point. I wouldn't disagree per se, but even you could make the same argument for Malik Yawmiddin, arguably.
No, no, that's on the day of due, but we're talking about everything like the creation, the state of like the state of the creation, the fact of the creation, the state of the creation, and the end destination is only possible by means of God being what Brother Assad said, immanent and transcendent. Or he called it as such.
Anyways, so for me, the reason I say like that Maliki Yawmiddin has an equal claim to Rahman Rahim is because his kingship of the day of due or judgment is what makes his claim and his power and whatever the case real. So if he is not, it's like power cannot exist without enforcement, that sort of idea. So the praise is not really his if it cannot, if it is not compulsively such. Nor do we need to serve him at all if we do not return to him. And even his mercy, you could say, is not true mercy if it is going to be reduced to nothing and we don't return to him. But anyway, on the ChatGPT portion now, I asked it, of course, on its own, what's the key passage? It chose verses 1 through 7. I think we had mentioned this one before, which contains that verse, guide us to the upright path, but it contains the whole last part that we serve you alone, and you alone we ask for help. So now, obviously, I had argued that verse 6 is sufficient based on the fact that this upright path is not just a random expression, it has a meaning to it defined in the Quran, where in Surah 1936, Isa says, worship God, my Lord and your Lord, this is an upright path. So the upright path is to worship God alone, basically. So it fits the broader message of the Quran, the broader theme of the Quran, which every surah connects to. And it's like the object of the prayer, basically. In terms of its analysis, anything that it adds here, it says it kind of builds towards this one request. Obviously, God is named by his mercy, he's praised, called by his attributes. One's posture with respect to God is defined. You alone we serve, you we ask for help. And then the request itself, I think that's pretty clear. And then I had mentioned also how in the last portion of the surah, there's a exact foil between we start asking for guidance, not the way of these and these, and not the astray. So at the beginning, there's a contrast between a guidance and astrayness. And then in between those two, there's the concept between an'amta alayhim and al-maghdubi alayhim, those whom you delighted or blessed upon, and the anger upon them, and those who anger is upon, basically. So those two get both contrasted kind of the same time at the ending of the surah. And there's actually a deeper point to that, I feel, but I think I'll get to that later. So for me, what's really helpful is kind of to split the surah into a couple, like 3 distinct chunks. So the way this works is you take the first 2 verses, followed by the next, I guess, 3, and then the last 2. So when you read it and kind of split it up, and you would see what I'm meaning here. So you start Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. In the name of God, the Gracious, the Merciful, the praise is for God, Lord of the beings. So in His name, we are praising. Then the next part, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. The Gracious, the Merciful, King of the Day of Judgment, you we serve and you we ask for help. So the way I always prefer to read this is that we're addressing God directly by His attributes, the Gracious, the Merciful, King of the Day of Do, you we serve and you we ask for help. And then the last portion, after addressing Him and stating that, we have the prayer at the end, guide us to the upright path, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Guide us to the upright path, the path of those who delight upon, not the path of those who anger is upon, and not the astray. So the way I summarize this, I guess, is I said, we start with an objective statement of praise to God alone. We then follow this by directly addressing God by His titles, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, and the statement that you alone we serve and you alone we ask for help. Then the main prayer, where we ask for guidance to or upon the upright path, and the qualification of which path this is, which we know is the path of serving God alone. So it summarizes as well, adding to this idea, it says that the surah opens by placing the prayer under God's name, with mercy as the divine framing. Then there's the objective statement of praise, just as a fact, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. It's not directly addressing God necessarily, it's rather just establishing the reality upon which the prayer rests. It says that God is the Lord of the world, so praise properly belongs to Him. Lord of everything, basically. Then the direct address through divine titles, verses 3 through 5. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. So we address God by His mercy, by His kind of authority, owner of the day when due is settled. And then we declare our orientation, you alone we serve and you alone we ask for help. So it's like a covenant calling upon God with His attributes. Then we get to the main prayer, where we ask for guidance to that bright path, which is the path of serving God alone. Both with the meaning of guiding us to this path and keeping us upon it, or guiding us upon it. And as part of this, then there's the last part, which qualifies which path exactly, by saying the path of those who God favored, delighted upon, not those who are under wrath or the astray. So any thoughts related to this idea, the structural kind of breakdown?
There's also a certain symmetry, two attributes, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then a single attribute, Malik Yawmiddin. And then there's also a pair, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, so there's a pair. And then there is a single supplication, so that mirrors. And then there's a framing in the first verse and in the last verse. They kind of mirror each other.
Yeah, mashallah, I had thought about that too a bit. Because you have kind of like a pair of attributes, one of which is a pair, like ar-Rahman ar-Rahim itself is a pair. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin is a pair of two verses. And then we get to the statement, which itself is also a pair. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. But it's a pair which is emphasizing singularity of orientation.
What do you think about the first verse, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? Do you think it belongs to the surah, or do you think it is a pre-reading supplication?
I think it belongs, but then again, I don't know that it's so different from any other given surah. Like as they tend to nowadays number it here and not elsewhere. But that's just a convention based, as far as I understand, on the Cairo edition, 1924 or whatever. So it does not necessitate the numbering should not be read too much into. So basically, I think it's kind of part of the surah, and it always kind of is, the way I see it, except for Surah Tawbah.
So yeah, they number it, but they still call it Surah Al-Hamd.
Yes, and most commonly they start the recitation without saying this one out loud, though that's different in the Shafi madhab and such. I do believe, in a sense, like the surah is starting with verse 2, like, kind of, if you will, like, I don't know how to put it.
I actually agree with you. That's why I mentioned that symmetry. And it's not like I'm trying to put it under my idea of symmetry here, but that verse kind of like stands on top somewhere above, like, like a crown, not not necessarily so related with the rest, except for that Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is being repeated, and then you take it as emphatic.
Yes, plus it does work like in the name of God, we praise God, that sort of, it is connected, but it's connected always, I find, similarly. Like Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alif Lam Mim is also connected. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. So, like I said, I had been focusing on, and this is like how I pretty much prefer to recite the surah as well, to kind of split it up with the first two verses as a separate idea, not really separate, but like as its own chunk, then 3 through 5, I should say, and then 6 and 7. Kind of first two, middle 3, last 2 symmetrically, but not trying to be symmetrical. It's just based on the content. So basically the way I summarized it once again was to say in verse 1 through 2, we attribute the praise to God alone. In verses 3 through 5, we declare our worship and reliance upon God alone for help and guidance. For help and worship. Then in 6 and 7, we ask his help for guidance upon the upright path or worshiping him alone. So each time it concerns the worship of God alone, or God alone, God's oneness, if you will, starting with the praise is God's, Lord of the beings, we declare it as objective reality that the praise is to God alone. Then we call upon God, declaring our orientation by his attributes, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. We declare that we worship you alone, we seek you alone for help. Great, oh gracious, merciful, King of the day of dew, that sort of thing. Then we, in the last two verses, we seek his help and guidance upon this path of worshiping him alone. So you can see this kind of how the AI summarizes it. Praise belongs to God alone. Worship and help seeking are done to God alone. And in the last two verses, we do that in form of a prayer. We seek his guidance to worship him alone. So I pushed it just a bit further, just to make it even clearer. So I say each section concerns the oneness of God. In section 1, it's declared as objective reality. The praise is God's, Lord of the beings. In section 2, it is declared as a chosen orientation. You we serve and you ask for help. And in section 3, it is sought as guidance in accordance to this chosen orientation. So each section is leading to the next one, if you see what I mean. It's starting with objectively, the praise is God's alone. Then we declare as our orientation the worship of God alone. Then we ask for guidance upon this orientation that we have declared of worshiping God alone. So the AI summarizes it as: initially, oneness is declared as objective reality. Second section, oneness is declared as the chosen orientation. And in the third section, oneness is sought as guidance. Or I would have said guidance is sought upon that chosen orientation, because each one is connecting to the next section. So I'll just say that again in case it wasn't clear. So basically, oneness of God is declared as objective reality. Based on this objective reality, we choose the orientation to worship him alone, to be in alignment with the objective reality. Then based on our chosen orientation, we seek God's guidance upon that, to do that chosen orientation, or to enact that. But it's all starting from the objective reality that the praise is God's, Lord of the beings, which is how the surah starts. And based on that objective reality, we declare our worship of God alone, and based on our chosen orientation, we ask God for guidance to actually do that or implement that.
This actually works very well if you start with verse 2, because if you start with verse 1, that very initial basmala is already a setup of an orientation. So this is how you do it, in which direction you do it. You see, because it's saying praise belongs to God alone, because he is the Lord of the worlds. So basically starting with the Alhamd. But when you start with the basmala, it's like it's already, you put it as your as the pinnacle of it.
Yeah, I guess I see what you mean. You're basically saying that verse 1 is already declaring your orientation.
Yes, that's already the setup. It's already directioning, positioning oneself.
Yeah, and it still is a nice idea, and it works nice because it basically, therefore, it frames the entire surah upon this orientation. So it adds an additional case of the same, um, like, I don't know how to put it.
But okay, so if we do everything by the name of God, with the name of God, by means of the name of God, then that all only adds layers on top of it, or emphasis on top of it, as everything is to that direction and praises to that direction, and then whatever worship, nabudu nastain, worship and loaning is towards God. We're asking him for help, seeking, and then to return, we're asking him for guidance, but we also direct our supplication to God.
Right.
Hello, peace. Um,
Peace.
I think that like if you go to chapter 4, verse 66, like it mentions how you go to the straight path. It says, and if we had decreed upon them to lay down your lives or leave your homes, they wouldn't have done it except for a few of them. But if they had done what they were instructed, it would have been better for them and a firmer position. And then we would have given them from us a great reward, and we would have guided them to a straight path. And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, those will be the ones upon whom Allah has bestowed favor of the prophets, the steadfast affirmers of truth, the martyrs, and the righteous, and excellent are those as companions. So the verse mentions them as blessed, like it's like the same wording in this surah, like they're blessed and they were on the straight path. The prophets, the steadfast, the witness, steadfast affirmers of truth, yeah, being the witness in this verse, and the way that they like would be guided to the straight path is if they do what they're instructed, and then if they do what they're instructed, then Allah guides them to a straight path.
Yeah, mashallah. A good verse to compare, actually. And there's also another one, which is at the end of Surah 4, I believe. Maybe I'll pull it up as well.
That was a good verse. That one actually illustrates that there is no blessing without obedience, no service, if you only do lip service, because you declare in Surah al-Fatiha that you serve, you alone we serve, but there is no service without obedience. And it also explains أنعمت الذين أنعمت عليهم, so who were actually delighted upon and who were blessed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like no straight path. Like there's no straight path without following the like rules or the instructions. Once you do them, then Allah reveals that straight path to you.
Well, the way I think of it, because I always go to the most fundamental level, is that at the core, God has basically instructed them to serve Him alone. So if they don't do what they're commanded, at the core, they're not doing that. Therefore, guidance is impossible to them because the straight path is serving God alone. And when they refuse to do what God has commanded, well, that's what God commanded.
So you mean this verse is basically against shirk, that they violated the oneness of God and His lordship?
Yeah. And it's like implied elsewhere too. Like this is at its core, the message is, I don't know how to put it. I mean, but I think you see what I mean anyway. Now, we have a few comments in the chat from Brother Mahdi and Brother Saud concerning the last sort of attributes of regarding the path. And I'm going to just save that discussion for just a bit later because I just want to finish on the overall structure here, and then we do get to that, inshallah.
Hold on, you were looking for a verse to
Oh, yeah.
forward this point? Yeah, when I diverted you. Sorry.
No worries. So it's this one here, I guess. Never would the Messiah disdain to be a servant of God, nor the like near angels, and whoever disdains of his servitude and arrogates, he will gather to them to himself altogether. So as for those who believed and worked righteousness, he will fulfill for them their rewards, and increase them from his favor. And as for those who who disdain and arrogate, then he shall punish them a painful punishment, and they shall not find for themselves from besides God a protector nor helper. O mankind, we've already brought you proof from your, already has come to you like proof from your Lord, and we have sent down to you a clear light. So as for those who believed in God and held fast to him, then he shall admit them in mercy from himself and favor, and guide them to himself upon an upright path, or guide them to himself an upright path. SubhanAllah. So the upright path is also being guided to God, which perfectly fits with worshiping God alone, being guided to God in a straight, upright way. Secondly, we had the contrast that the Messiah would never disdain to be a servant of God. Remember how even the Messiah had been the quote in 1936 where I said, "O my people, worship God, my Lord and your Lord. This is an upright path." So the upright path defined by his own words was to worship God alone. God says the Messiah would never disdain to be a servant of God. And whoever does disdain and is arrogant, they will be gathered basically to hell. I think that was, I guess, the main point. I think there was another, but
there's another chapter. Um, it mentions like this is like another kind of evidence that like doing instructions leads to the straight path. It's not just believing and then you're on the straight path. Like it's doing instructions and then you're on the path. So there's a verse that mentions like it mentions 9 things that um like it says like it says for Allah basically says to the Prophet to say, come over here, I will teach you what your Lord tells you to do. Then it mentions like 9 things and then it says like this is the straight path. I think yeah, I forgot the chapter, but I'll try and look for it.
yeah, no worries. I think it's chapter 6, towards the end. Yeah. Also, I found another one. And those who belie our signs are deaf and dumb in darknesses. Whoever God wills, he astrays, and whoever he wills, he puts him upon an upright path.
Yeah, I found it. Chapter
Yeah.
6, 151 to 153. Yeah, you're right. It's towards the end. Like, like, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Nothing. I'll just read if you want. It would be a good
Okay.
connection. Say, come, shall I recite to you what God has forbidden upon you, that you not associate with him anything. Notice how that's the first one. And to parents, good, and do not kill your children from poverty. We provide for you and them. And do not approach immoralities, what is apparent of them and what is concealed. And do not kill the soul which God has forbidden, except by right, that he has instructed you, that you may comprehend. And do not approach the orphan's property except in what is best until he reaches maturity, and give full measure and weight in justice. We do not burden a soul except its capacity. And when you bear witness, then be just, even if it is a relative, and fulfill the covenant of God that he has instructed you, that you may remember. And that this is my upright path, so follow it, and do not follow paths so they would separate you from his path. That he has instructed you, that you may beware. So the way I see it is like it's all the same thing. The upright path is that you not associate with him anything, that you worship God alone, and how you worship God alone in terms of your actions and interactions is all the details that he gives, like the righteous work, basically.
I think like even in like verse 153, like when it says, and this is my path, like some translations put my in capitals, but I do think it's still the prophet speaking when it says, and this is my path straight. Like he's just telling the believers like what he's been doing, like what he does, and like Allah's telling him to say, this is like my path, meaning the prophet's path. So follow it. So yeah. So like the straight path is like following these ethics and these commandments. Like it's not even a big set of instructions, but there's like 9, but like they can like encompass a lot of things. Just like these 9.
Yeah, and Brother Afra is Matthew, rather, I guess, adds that why not the straight path? I guess the question, if I'm understanding correctly, instead of the upright. I guess concerning my translation, but basically either is correct. I think it is connotating straightness, but in the core root sense of uprightness, because the root is of the same root of standing. So when you stand, you're straight up. So it does mean straightness per se, but it also means uprightness, which also kind of works in English to be upright. But it's like upright rather than crooked, that sort of a thing. But the core, like the root meaning is standing of the root anyway.
It's upstanding like, so there is directionality in it too, but also somewhat upholding and also continuous, not necessarily like steadfast, that's probably an overkill, but upholding, maintaining the direction. So there is the upholding of the commands and also upholding of the stance, the position, the standing.
Let me try to get a bit further because we are almost out of time, and I did want to address like the ending of the surah a bit, at least for the questions that were in the chat. But for this, I just had one more point on the structure, I think, which was that there's another way you can read the surah, which might be the default. I'm not really sure, but I find this reading weaker nonetheless, where you read it like, I think I still have the surah up. So you read it like the first 4 verses together, and then you do like 5 through 7, kind of in 2 chunks, at least how you're conceptualizing it. So you ask, in the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, the praise. Actually, you're not asking, you're just stating. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, the praise is God's Lord of the beings, the gracious, the merciful, continuing to describe God, ruler of the day of due. And then all of a sudden, in verse 5, you are now addressing God directly. You we serve, and you we ask for help. Guide us to the upright path, the path of those who delight upon, not the path of those who anger us upon, and not the astray. So here, basically, you attach verse 3 and 4 as continued description of God, whereas God had just been described in verse 1, if you will, as the gracious and merciful. Then the praises for God, Lord of the beings, the gracious and merciful. So this one's also possible. For me, I do find it weaker than to separate the first two, address God directly by the gracious and merciful, ruler of the day of due. You alone we serve, and you alone we ask for help. Hopefully these 2 options are clear what I mean by that. But anyway,
Malik,
say again?
And how do you read Malik or Malik? You do have an alif here, like owner, possessor, master, ruler, probably. No, actually, ruler or king is without an alif. King, sovereign, yeah, probably ruler has no alif. And if you do have an elongation there, it more so is owner or master, kind of. Traditionally, both of them are equally strong, but what I was saying is that like short sound, owner, possessor, master, and long sound, or and long. No, I just mixed it up. So basically, ruler or king is a short sound. Ruler, king, sovereign, that kind of thing. You see why I'm asking? Because you have,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have a long vowel, but you have a translation for the short vowel, kind of.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Basically, I guess I never really was so careful about it clearly, but I slightly would be more. I find both equally fine, obviously. However, I guess just based purely on the thematic function, I would be slightly partial towards the short one, which is the one I translated.
King of the Day of Judgment, in other words, or sovereign of
Yeah.
the Day of Judgment. Right. Okay.
But anyway, I think I'll just, since we're out of time, I'll just address the questions anyway, even though we didn't get that far, just so people at least have an answer. Inshallah, we had Brother Saad, I think, or Brother Mahdi mentioning the ending is like an admission highlighting the other states, al-Maghdub and ad-Dadin, a double emphasis of the losers. The loss like doubling here by being astray, concluding in an earned wrath. Yes. Though God does mention the wrath first.
No, those two are different and separate, because waladdallin. So there is one category, and then there is another category. It's not an emphasis. It is two different categories.
Yes, however, even with two categories, you can have two categories that does not necessitate them being exclusive, but they can just be God emphasizing two aspects. Like it would still work, if you see what I mean.
I do see them as different, as exclusive. So if you, and Brother Sod asked about it, yes, they are mentioned separately, and how can one conceptualize the difference? Of those who angered God are those who were kicked down the path. So they were pushing in the wrong direction and they were kicked down by force, like Pharaoh, for instance, Pharaoh, and those who went astray, went awry, are those who just, deviated and wandered blindly.
Right, but even for Pharaoh, if you take that example, it says, وَضَلَ فِرْعَوْنُ قَوْمُهُ وَمَا هَدَى. Pharaoh astrayed his people and did not guide them. So despite that he's clearly one who the anger is upon, he's clearly astray because he said, follow me, I will guide you. What does he say? I do not show you except لا أراكم إلا ما أرى وما أهديكم إلا سبيل الرشاد. I do not show you except what I see, and I do not guide you except to the rightly guided way. He even almost says something similar to Sirat al-Mustaqim, the rightly guided way, a bit different wording, but he thinks that he is guiding his people, and God says he led his people astray and did not guide them. So he's very astray in even how he saw things, let alone the anger, obviously, upon him.
So you think that the last one is basically an overarching category, so that covers those who angered God and those who didn't, but they were astray nonetheless. So those who angered God, that's included, and the astray ones is more general. Am I getting you right?
Kind of, yes, but due to everything being kind of binary, I see them as actually interchangeable, meaning those who are guided are the ones who God delighted upon. Those who are astray are the ones who God is angry upon. you can specify with one or the other. Like, for instance, God says, for the man, like in Surah 24, he makes the oath that may God's curse be upon him. And the woman makes the oath, may God's anger be upon her if she's lying. For me, it's the same thing, just expressed a different way.
So back to Brother Sud's question, how would you conceptualize it? Because like for me, those who angered God, those who like pushed forcefully in the wrong direction and they were kicked out, and those who were astray just fell off kind of. But what do you think about that? How can you give that imagery maybe?
Oh, basically the question, why are they mentioned separately?
Or how to conceptualize them, how to envision them, that Brother Sod asked.
Yes. So basically, I guess I have it on the screen here. So we ask for, first of all, just acknowledge the repeating structure here. We have guidance, guide us, and it ends with the astrayness. Then we have internally the path of those you delighted upon, not anger upon. So we're asking for guidance, specifying the path of those you delighted upon, not the anger upon and the astray, which is the opposite of guidance. So it's first of all, a perfect foil. And we're asking for guidance to the way of those who God basically was happy with, delighted upon, blessed, or bliss kind of, as opposed to the opposite of that delight, which is the anger and the astray. But the key point here, actually, I think, or the clue, is that we are asking God for guidance, like literally, and to the way of those you delighted upon them, you, like anamta, you delighted upon them, not the anger upon. This one does not reference God. It's absent of the reference of God, I believe. So it's saying, it could have said غَضَّبْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, which sometimes it does in the Quran, use a similar form. It could have said like those who you angered upon, but rather it takes God out. It says just angers upon, without God, okay? And not the astray, not those you astrayed, which sometimes the Quran uses in that form, but here just the astray, without God. So that's the point, I believe. Hopefully this is getting to an answer. I hope it's not unrelated, but where we're asking God for guidance. In other words, we need God for guidance. Without God, we go astray by default. We're asking God to bless us. Without God's blessing, we obtain anger by default. So we're acknowledging that we require God's blessing and his guidance. Otherwise, we obtain wrath and astrayness without God.
Okay, I see your point. Yeah, that would be not the angered upon, not the angered ones, and not the straying or straying, deviating ones. It doesn't say that God led them astray or God angered upon them. You're right, but the one is like passive, the ones angered upon, and not the straying ones. So there's another like aspect to it.
I think also Brother Saud adds that a secondary meaning that may be conveyed is that whilst the guided are one group, the unguided are fractured. But for me, like, another proof is that you cannot really have one without the other, because somebody who's astray, but God's anger is not upon them, is not truly astray. That's what defines astrayness. Somebody who God's anger is upon cannot be guided. Those are category mismatches. So that's why I see it more as...
There is also a category, those who God abandoned. We're over time, I know. Those who were ignored or abandoned, neglected by God because they neglected him. But there's also a type of anger. Would you say that?
Yeah, exactly. Or astrayness in having forgotten God and being forgotten by God, thus lost. Yeah, I do. I'm actually really late for my class, so inshallah, I think we'll wrap it up. But we'll resume here, God willing, on part 2. Peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Peace.
Thank you so much. See you next time, inshallah. Salam.
Salam.